As the story goes, once upon a time, on a continent far, far away, lived villagers who happily farmed their lands and joyfully harvested abundant crops. On the western coastal region of this continent, small villages could be observed bustling with activity while their villagers were casting fish nets and setting crab traps, possibly to provide food for the evening meal or barter at the local marketplace for other needed goods and services. Occasionally, travelers from other lands would pass through and observe their local customs. Tribal customs like coming-of-age rituals, births, deaths, and marriages were celebrated with the usual fanfare befitting such life situations, transitions. Soon Europeans began arriving by sea. The villagers did not know that the newly arrived European travelers to their shoreline would impact their lives so traumatically and the lives of future generations. The villagers were very trusting. As the story goes, the Europeans came, the Europeans saw, and the Europeans conquered. The happy villagers were taken away from their home farmlands and fishing villages. Families were torn apart. Husbands were separated from their wives. Children were separated from mothers and fathers. Elders of the villages were slain and left to die. The happy villagers became very unhappy, distraught, and bewildered, to say the least. In addition to their personal humiliation and shame, these happy, responsible beings were taken in shackles from their homelands to a strange land across thousands of miles of ocean water. Some of the villagers survived the journey, and some did not. As the story goes, years went by, the villagers adjusted to the new land and the limited freedom allowed by their masters. The language of the motherland was soon forgotten, the language of the new land adopted. Soon new rituals were established. Semblance of survival began appearing. Children were born. Some villagers died. Some ran away to other places in the new land. Meanwhile, there was a major conflict in the new land between the north and the south regions. The villagers could not believe that this conflict would actually provide them with a free status. As the story goes, the conflict became war. President Lincoln, who was president of the new land at that time, signed a document giving the villagers their freedom. This signaled another adjustment to the lives of the villagers. Some of the villagers continued their lives as they had lived in the new land. Others chose to test their new freedoms, only to discover that that signed document was just that, a signed piece of paper. The rest is history. African-American history, the survival of a group of villagers, the African Americans. Today they are scholars, historians, inventors, politicians, lawyers, physicians, musicians, educators, athletes, ministers, social workers, journalists, proprietors, scientists, artists, military officers, novelists, astronauts, media personalities, Olympic champions, presidential candidates, and a Nobel Peace Prize winner. All descendants of a group of villagers from a continent far, far away.